we've done a lot of video.
Yes.
In the past, looking at gameplay. I mean, we always have to look at gameplay eventually on this podcast, even though it isn't a podcast, but audio here. And what we like to do when we do these sort of react videos, we like seeing content from the community that is really thoughtful about League, you know, not just the vomit spit out, the typical narratives. Like, we've covered the boring narratives all the time. Losers queue, you know, League's toxic, the community, everyone hates each other, all that sort of stuff. This video popped up on our feeds by GBay99. Now, he makes, docuseries, very high quality YouTube. He makes really good stuff. He's made really good stuff over the years for YouTube.
Very research stuff, yeah.
Really research stuff. And, he's been playing the game for a long time. Almost longer than us, or probably the same time with us. Right? We started, season 2, season 3, right? So a long time player, but he hasn't played much at all for the last couple of years. And recently, he's come back and he's sort of making some League content and started back to playing the game. And he came out with a video here that says 5 ways League of Legends broke my brain. And obviously, the title of this is going to pique our interest at the Broken My Concept podcast, because we love talking about psychology, thinking about how people behave with the game. We really want to help people understand the game better so they can have a better experience, because League has a bad rep. So this video was very insightful. We're going to be reacting to this. Charlie hasn't seen this at all. I've skimmed over it. So have you heard us?
Skimmed over it.
We'll do it literally from start to finish here. So we'll talk about a commentary. So let's just get started, and then we're starting with point number 1, Curtis, are we?
Yep.
Ways that League of Legends breaks you. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. League of Legends makes you incredibly antagonistic. The single biggest thing that I took away when I was watching all these old VODs of myself were how I was incredibly uncharitable to anyone and everyone I spoke to. Anytime something happened in-game, I would get incredibly angry about it. Anytime a teammate tried to say anything to me, I would respond with anger and vitriol toward them. Even if a chatter said something on my live stream, the responses I gave were always with this tone of bitterness or anger, even if it was from something like a donation. Anytime.
So just a little context there. What he's talking about there is he found a folder on his computer of VODs from his streamer when he played it, because he used to record a lot of his gameplay from 10 years ago. And what he's saying here, he's shocked at sort of the way he was behaving in those videos.
Anyone tried to say anything to me, I would always assume it was an insult. That's how I viewed every interaction. Anytime someone tried to talk to me, I assumed they were insulting me. This is something that naturally happens if you play League of Legends a lot, because normally when people talk to you in League, they don't say nice things. If somebody says something as simple as, Aurelia, stop pushing your lane, that might be the jungler or the mid laner telling you, hey, I'm gonna come gank your lane if you stop pushing it to tower. But more often than not, that is an insult. Any kind of advice given to you in-game is always with the assumption of a teammate saying, hey, I know how to play your role better than you do, and since you apparently don't understand what your responsibilities are, let me take care of that for you while I also take care of my own role. Anytime there's any communication in League of Legends at all, it normally comes with a negative underlying tone, and so the more you play League of Legends, the more you learn that when someone is trying to give you advice, it's normally with some kind of passive-aggressive, insulting tone. And
I think that's super interesting, because like my perspective on that is a lot of that has to do with the timing. Have you noticed that when people say stuff in the game, it's always after an event? So like, let's use that split pushing example, right? Aurelia, don't split push. That is never like a call that they're making, like, this is how we're going to win. It's always because the Aurelia split push, it failed, and then they tell the Aurelia not to push. And that whole timing aspect make it seem like it's not helpful, it's actually just venting and complaining, right? So I think, yeah, a lot of comms, it's all about the time when you say it, not just like what you're saying.
I think we've covered this on the podcast before, but the whole idea that like, a lot of people don't realize how much they don't know about other roles and other champions. And so I think Wipro famously had that whole take about how much more positive the League community would be if everyone spent time playing every role to at least a little degree. Like
much more empathy, for sure.
You'd have a lot more empathy. And I do think that there is this kind of baseline kind of like, starting point that a lot of us have in League when you first start playing League. It's like you have this very simplistic idea in your mind. If only this person did this, then everything would be okay. But you got to realize that that initial thought that you're having is probably wrought with many, many, many errors. But in your limited understanding of that other role, you don't have the capacity to be able to be like, you know what? Yeah, I probably am wrong here. And the reality is that, you know, let's say again you're a jungler, and then your top laner just keeps split pushing, and in your mind you've got this image for some reason of like, if the top laner were just magically here at this fight, then we would win it. But that's not the way.
No, it
League
looks
works.
so much simpler on the surface. Like, there's so many steps that go into that.
Exactly right. It's like you're assuming that they can just randomly shove and move. Like you're assuming that they're getting fire in the first place. You're assuming that that champion can maybe has ultimate for this particular fight, or
Item spike coming into
Item
play,
spikes.
matchup knowledge.
And you're even assuming that by the time that they get there, that a fight is even going to be happening, right? There's so many like logistics and small little details that unless you play the role and you have an understanding of like the you know how it feels like yourself, that you're just not really going to understand it. And so like as you play League, it has this interesting effect of like humbling you. Like if you're genuinely open-minded and curious about League, you start to realize how little you do know at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
and you always say, Nathan, this is mostly apparent when it comes to laners wanting ganks. Like, laners have no idea what a good gank or a bad gank is, right?
No idea what their jungler wants. Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about he saying that he's observed himself being very sort of bitter to comments and like just, you know, really angry like person. So I'll say this is more so when it comes to content creators and streamers of League, you know, and people watching you. Think about you're playing the game. Your skill is on display in real time. Imagine if like, you know, you're playing a support, you're playing a sport or whatever, and like, you just have this audience just like watching every move and can be critical of every move. Of course, you're going to, unless you have a certain mindset, you're going to, you know, you are going to feel like that everyone's judging you. It's actually putting yourself on
display.
On display. It's like an execution, you know, in a way. It's crazy.
Yeah, you're exposing yourself.
You're
Yeah,
exposing
you
yourself.
actually are.
You know, I think there's certain streamers that just like enter this mode. Like, you know, you look at people like, you know, Tyler One and like Mid Beast and stuff. Like, really, they just don't give a.
They laugh
shit.
at themselves. They laugh at themselves. That's
themselves.
so
You have to
important.
sort of-
Yes.
yeah, if you're going to be a sort of content creator, because if you take your topics too seriously, number one, your chat will see that and flame you more because they know they can, you know, get reactions from you. And then, it's just again that idea of like, you know, you put in it all and everyone's watching you every single move and just judging you all the time. So you are going to feel, you know, defensive because it is.
But I also think I'm glad that you brought up Midbeast and Tyler One specifically because they're just very confident people in general. Like, you know, they're well, like, what's the word?
Well-adjusted.
Well-adjusted people, such that they probably have a level of confidence and I guess, you know,
They're playing the game as well. They're leaning into it because they know what the chat wants. They know how
it's
they should respond.
It's entertainment. But
They
for a
get
lot
the
of
game.
other people, for a lot of us, like it's not entertainment. It's not like and you know the sad reality for a lot of people that take League quite seriously is that you know we've addressed this many times that people's rank is, you know, their self-worth is attached to their rank, right? And so if you're losing a game, it's not just you're losing LP. It's like you're losing for some people, like it's like a stab in like
It's your identity level. It's the
level.
identity level behavior.
And especially when you're young, when you're in your younger years, like, you know, he was very young when he's kind of reflecting back on this game.
League's his life.
You're insecure, right? You don't have a lot of other, you know, especially talking about his life story. He was talking about he wasn't really good in many other areas. You know, we all resonate with that. Where gaming was like kind of the cornerstone of like our. You know, our personality building, I guess, and confidence building. So if someone were to judge us on our performance or make a comment out on our performance, we would take it personally.
Yeah, being bad at the thing you're meant to be good at.
Exactly.
Painful.
Right.
The only thing that you're meant to do.
Yeah,
Specifically
thing that
as well.
defines you. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Exactly, and he was at that time, I think, streaming, you know, 10 hours a day. That was his defining thing. Like, I'm a streamer. That's what I do. I stream League of Legends. You know. So, but you could argue that, you know, I think the point that he's trying to making is that this is also extending out to the League community holistically, and I would argue that in any competitive, if you give a shit about something, right? If you give a shit about something, you're trying to get good at something. You're competitive. There is going to be emotion thrown around. Like, we're not logical in the heat of the moment. Like, you're giving criticism to someone in real time when they're trying to win a competition.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty normal to say that in most other endeavors, people are going to be defensive. Like, if I comment on my partner's driving, even, and I get, why don't you slow down? It's like, they don't want to hear my advice at that moment. Like,
I feel the same. If I cook something for someone and they comment on the food in a bad way, it's like, like what the hell? I just put all my time into this food and you're going to give me a slight critique.
And that's not even in the competitive setting. That's just a normal day-to-day setting. So I do think that there's like diseases that we like to be, I think League pushes it to the extreme, right? Obviously, I think heightens our emotions, but like, I don't think it's kind of like it only exists in League, you know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed. Should we keep watching?
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say that as I started playing League of Legends again recently, I have allowed this to creep into my normal everyday life, even with interactions with real human beings. Like as I've mentioned before, recently I became a father, and as a first-time parent, I am very intimidated and nervous about raising my kid right, doing everything that they need done, and not messing up in some sort of way that will scar them for life. The other day, there was some family over at their house, and I was feeding the baby a bottle or doing something where the baby was getting fussy, and I was worried that I wasn't doing something right. And a family member told me, hey, it looks like you're struggling. You should do this instead. And I immediately got defensive. I got so angry. I yelled at them. I said, why are you questioning my parenting? I don't know where that rage came from. But then I think I realized later that the previous week was when I first started playing League of Legends again. And I was getting back in that mindset of just assuming that anytime someone tries to help you, it's kind of with an insult. Like, yeah, you don't know what you're doing. Let me do your job for you because apparently you're so incompetent. I forgot, that's not how normal human beings act. Normally, when someone tries to give you advice, they're trying to be helpful. That's not with any sort of negative underlying tone.
And the thing where it amplifies with League as well is because of the natural disrespect people have for the skill of the game. Everything looks simple in League, looking from a bird's eye view or in hindsight, compared to maybe, real life situations. So
I also think that he's right and wrong, because I would actually argue people are like that in real life.
Agreed.
League of Legends can amplify and bring it out, but having worked in like customer service jobs and just seen people, like, yes, people are defensive. If you give someone criticism, like I've described with the driving and the cooking or in anything, it's human nature to get defensive.
I agree, and I think that what it's a sign of is that it's a sign that you have high standards of yourself, and then I think maybe, if there's people around you that are not like that, maybe it's because they're not taking pride in whatever it is they're doing, or they're not invested in the outcome of said activity.
Yeah.
Right. You're getting up. You got emotional about criticism about cooking because you care about making a delicious meal and them enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
People care about League, and they want to care about their rank. That's
exactly
why,
right. They care about the driving. They don't want to be seen as a bad driver because it's like you're driving them. It's a criticism. They care about that. So like I just think that I think it's a push to say personally. I would not say that is something that is only because of League. I think that's just because you care about it. And League has that overlap to him in the sense that he's feeding his kid a bottle of milk or whatever the hell it is, because they're both things that he cares about.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
I also think, not to dive too deep into the psychology, but like the other person in this conversation who's critiqued him probably also represents part of himself in a way. Like he knows he's doing a bad job. He's already angry at himself. Now someone else comes and says it, bam, triggered, immediately. So you wouldn't actually be offended by what other people say about you if you didn't slightly believe it.
That's actually so fascinating. I found this in League as well, because when think about all of us, right? Our journey as players and as coaches, the more that you've developed your understanding of the game, the less emotional you become when someone critiques you. Like if someone dropped a comment in one of your videos and said, "Oh, I don't really know about that, what you said here," at least for me, I'm not getting that offended because I know what I'm talking about, and I have absolute confidence in what I'm saying.
And it's because of the results you've gotten people.
Because of the result, and just exactly, I've done this for years. I put the work in. I know that it works. So the reality is that like people critique my mail build or whatever. I don't get offended because I have that confidence. But think about back in the day. if I got critiqued with anything, I would be very, very quick to get frustrated because I didn't have that confidence.
You sort of believe it.
And I kind of believe it. I'm like, they're probably right. I actually am not that
Because you
good.
couldn't rationalize it. That's the point. It doesn't even have to be necessarily right or wrong. You just need rationale that makes sense. Because, I mean, we've been doing tier lists recently in our school communities, right? I put Ezreal in like S tier and AD carry. People didn't like that, but I had a conversation even with other coaches in the academy, and I rationalized it to them. And they can still disagree, but like, yeah, I mean, I believe it pretty strongly, and I give you my reasons, and I feel good about that. I don't feel offended if people disagree.
And this is, and then where this is prevalent in the League space is that League is such a hard game that no one, very, very, very few people have like true confidence in their ability to play the game to a high level. Because League is such a complex game. It takes years and years and years and years and years of playing it through many different lenses, many different champions, getting into the details to finally actually understand how all the pieces come together. It's only like, you know, at least for me, like the back end of my coaching career that now that I can confidently say that I'm a very world-class coach. But that's like, again, played the game since season 1, pro coach for multiple years, individual coaching for multiple years, tens of thousands of hours to get to this point. Before that point, I wouldn't really have that confidence. That's just to show the complexity of League of Legends. So that means 99% of the player base probably has deep insecurity about their level of play and their ability to actually play the game and understand the game to a high level. Hence why there is that, you know, probably quick to, what's it called? Like, you're very quick to respond or quick to offend.
Yeah.
This is kind of one of the nastier elements to League of Legends, but on the bright side, this is the easiest mindset to change or very quickly fix. If you go outside and step into the real world, touch some grass, and interact with human beings, you will very quickly learn that real human beings do not interact with each other the way that League of Legends players do. And as long as
You disagree with that, Charles?
No, I think that it's just heightened in League. Like, let's say is a percentage of overall conversation that like negativity, let's just call it 80% of League combo is negative. In real life, maybe 5% is negative.
Well, it's because of the anonymity.
Anonymity, yeah.
Of things, you know, your height, so people are way more, you know.
Yeah, but he's right. It's more prevalent, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. In the real
People
world.
are less.
Like I
less
just described like customer service environments where it does happen all the time, where people are very negative, and we're describing any part of life that represents displaying a skill. It exists, but most of life doesn't represent that, you know.
as you spend a little bit of time with others, you can very quickly fix this mind.
Again, like one of the most common ones is the workplace, right? Just say it again, like people get very, very irky about when you give them feedback at their job. 100%. Like think about like, I mean, Nathan, you couldn't relate to this, but like just working in like a normal job, like people get very angry at each other for like the minor things, like communication problems, sending emails around. Like I'm sure people can relate to this. Like people act like they're in a solo queue game. They really do. And
But I would agree with your sentiment though that like having like face-to-face communication and seeing and talking to people in real life is a really great kind of like contrast to the anonymity, no face. No, it is. If you're only playing League of Legends for like 10 hours a day and you're like isolated in your room and you're just playing League of Legends, it's very easy to get disconnected from like the realities of like what it's like to communicate with a person and empathy.
Yeah.
Like
See a face.
And like that's where that lack of empathy I think gets really heightened very, very quickly. So I do agree. I think he's spot on and said it is a great form of calibration.
To reset.
But that's with anything, whether it's social media, League of Legends, or any other.
Yep. Watching
TV and Netflix for 10 hours a day.
You lose perspective.
You lose perspective.
makes sense.
Exactly right.
Mindset, because it is a nasty one you picked up. The second thing I noticed that League did to me was a bit more detrimental, though, especially when it comes to my career, and it kind of extends from this habit that people have when it comes to communication. Because in League of Legends, everyone takes everything and because you sometimes do need to communicate things to your teammates, you often have to repeat yourself over and over. If you're trying to say someone is missing from your lane and allies need to be careful of a gank, you can't just give one little ping or one message in chat. You should be spamming MIA in chat or spamming the missing ping. Just constantly say the same message to your teammates over and over. Just one message isn't going to come through. People won't notice that, or they'll assume it's an insult and you're not being serious. You got to really hammer the point home if you're going to have any hope of people listening to you. And so the more I played League of Legends,
And I think that's normal. I think that's fine, right? I'll say that's clear communication in a competitive setting. I think pings should be used like that. I think it's very hard to realistically say that anyone will follow any of my scores with one ping. It should be designed
Because it's
that
a
way.
noisy environment. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and people are getting distracted, right? You know, you have to make things very clear in a game, especially with how fast-paced it is. So, in terms of the league setting, I think that's completely fine. It sort of sounds like you're sort of saying it's like a negative.
We'll say I don't know what his point is.
over the years, the more I learned that anytime I communicate something to others, I really need to repeat it if I want them to understand the point. And I think that this has really hurt my ability to write, especially when it comes to my career making YouTube videos. Like, I remember when I first started making YouTube videos, I would often make videos that gave general advice to League players on how to get better at the game with some underlying logic beneath it that I would try to explain. Like, a very popular idea in early seasons of League was the idea of elo hell. Was it possible for you to be at a low enough rating that because League is a team game, you wouldn't be able to win more games than you lose and climb out? You would have such bad teammates that they would constantly cause you to lose every match no matter how well you play. I made a couple of videos addressing this topic where I pointed out, hey, as long as you aren't the person on your team who is causing your team to lose, even if there are random AFKs or intentional feeders, they will show up on the enemy team more often than they show up on your team, as long as you aren't the person who is actually responsible for the loss.
It's very basic.
Yeah, I love the way he's put it. It's just clear as day.
Clear as day. This is why elo hell doesn't exist.
And so while an intentional feeder might cause you to lose an individual match, as long as you play a large enough sample size, if you truly don't deserve to be at your rating, you will win more games than you lose and climb out of elo hell. Very sound logic and an interesting video, I thought, until I started getting a million comments that would say, yeah, that's all well and good, but you haven't seen how bad my teammates are in my rating. Oh yeah, this is G-Bay just talking from Platinum. He doesn't know how bad it is down in Bronze, down in Silver. People have no clue how bad these guys are. I would read these comments and I would get so angry because I would just be pulling my hair out. I addressed your point in the video. Did you not watch the video? But the conclusion I would come to was, they must have just not understood it. I need to repeat the point. I need to say it in clearer terms or do something to make sure that they understand next time, because that's what you got to do with the League community. You got to repeat stuff over and over. Ever since then, even till today.
I definitely agree with that with the League community. I mean, we repeat the same messages over and over. When it comes, I think that what we realize is the solution to that is bring up the gameplay, right? That's what we've done with our case studies and that, because you can't.
Irrefutable.
You can't fight comments with words. You can't, like, that's what we've found a lot, and that's sort of, I guess, the flaw with sometimes the podcast is because, you know, why a lot of people, why this is still a niche podcast and people still don't really believe what we say here. You know, about this stuff. And once we bring up the gameplay, you know, we can very easily break it down. It will make sense, just again, the purpose of the case studies.
But I would argue that, because I really want to expand on this. I think this is really important because often you'll have a conversation with someone, and this is not even in the League context, and you have this opinion, and they just can't see your opinion, right? And you can be hyperlogical, you can explain it, you can understand your reasoning, how you come to that conclusion, you can, yeah, whatever. But they're not ready to hear that answer. They may not be ready in their current worldview, in their current situation, mentally or emotionally. They may not be ready to accept the truth, right? We're not all just rational, logical creatures that every single thing we hear, we're gonna be, oh, yep, that makes sense for my life, so I'm gonna implement that right now. That's just not the way we work. We have mental baggage, we have trauma, we have a particular worldview that things neatly and conveniently fit in there, and we don't want to break that worldview. So in the League community specifically, let's take the concept of like elo hell and the 30-30-40 rule or all these sorts of things. They trigger people because where the disconnect is that they are the reason they are at that rank, and that is the fundamental tough pill for them to swallow. That is the counter to losers queue, or the reason losers queue exists is because it's a defense mechanism to prove that they aren't the problem. And so you can say whatever is right. You can even sometimes look at their gameplay, but they're always going to find a chink in the armor because it doesn't comport with their view of reality.
That's true. Even the gameplay, yeah.
Even the gameplay. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be, and it's very easy. It was an interesting podcast I was listening to, and it was actually talking about people who have counter narratives. Like, let's say you have a belief that was like, you know, in culture and in society, believed by the majority, right? And a common one would be like, what's it with Galileo, where the sun,
Earth is fine.
well, that, and then the Earth, the sun revolves around the Earth.
The Earth was the center of the
Yeah,
universe.
exactly right. So what happened is that even though there was proof, and he proved all these things, and that it was sound logic, people couldn't
He was still a heretic.
He was still exactly right. So people didn't comport with their view of reality. So it took ages for people to slowly change their worldview. And in League, obviously it's you know, a microcosm. It's a very small niche thing, but it's the same. It's the exact same premise. If you're coming into the game of League thinking that everyone else is the problem and you're not the problem, it's going to take more than one little thing for someone to completely shatter your worldview. And so in a way, the skill that is developed and is forced to develop is you're trying to get across a point through so many different angles to break that narrative through differing lenses, different views. Like you've got this like circular orb of that view, and you're coming in at different angles to try and
Doing
find
analogies, different video here,
metaphors
this
and
concept,
analogies and different ways of viewing it through their lens, your lens, boom, 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 boom. And then only then will you chink the armor enough that it will shatter, and then their whole worldview will change. It's an incremental journey. That is part of actually your job as an editor. To work with. Some people are going to get it. Some people are going to get it. First analogy, first metaphor, they'll get it. Other people, they're what we would call problem clients, or the clients that take a while.
Some people never get it.
And some people never exactly.
And that's okay.
That's
As
okay
a
as
creator,
well.
you have to be at peace with that.
So, like, I don't see this as and I don't see this as something that, again, I would argue. It's not that it isn't the reality, but I wouldn't say it's a problem, and I don't think it's a reality that's purely centered around League. This is present in many areas in culture.
Hey, I have a really terrible habit whenever I make a YouTube video of repeating the point, of belaboring, of constantly stating the same thing over and over again to make sure the audience understands that I'm literally doing that right now. Being able to speak briefly and concisely is a talent in the world of writing, and a talent that I am still trying to chase. And I don't know, I'm blaming this one on League of Legends.
I'll say one last thing about this one is that is the skill, right? You have to try and get across the point as concisely and as articulately as possible. But I do think, you know, repeatability, consistency is really, I think it's really
to get ideas across.
It's about packaging. You can repeat the same message in a different package.
Yes.
That's the goal. The goal should be, think about it, everything we say is kind of an extension of the same message, but we're just coming up with unique ways, hopefully, to package that idea. And that's the thing, right? Because you can't just say something once and assume everyone gets it. So,
and you're saying repeat it in the exact same format that you did again and again. That's like